What's up, guys? Welcome back to the basement. Nathan, toolbox, Bert's back there hanging out. I got my Power Rangers hat on, and tonight we are going to talk about something that was actually requested by one of the viewers on another video. We wanted to talk about something that is obviously one of the basics, but a lot of us, it's something that we have to look into whenever we're putting a marker together. It's something that you need to think about whenever you're snagging parts. We wanted to talk about what are the differences between a pre-2K and a post-2K autococker. Okay, so really there's not a massive amount of difference between the two. Obviously we're still working on the same platform. Everything still pretty well works the same. We still have all the same parts, but there are a few differences that definitely come into play when you're trying to put together a pre-2K versus a post-2K autococker. So we're going to try to cover some of those tonight. Obviously there's a few exceptions with pretty much anything. It's just the way these markers go. So the first thing that we wanted to cover is the Banjo Bolt. The Banjo Bolt in a pre-2K cocker is much smaller than the Banjo Bolt in a 2K cocker. Okay, so for example, this right here is a 2K spec or 2K plus spec front block. Okay, as we can see right here, this is where our Banjo Bolt would go through, and the Banjo Bolt is obviously the bolt that goes through your front block and it mounts it to the body of the marker, allows air to come through the valve chamber up into your LPR to run your pneumatics. So we have where our Banjo Bolt hole is, we have an O-ring land here for it to seal, and the reciprocating one on the back side. Now this is a pre-2K front block. As you can see, the Banjo Bolt hole is obviously much smaller. Okay, so the Banjo Bolt itself is much smaller. Okay, so we still have the O-ring land on both sides for it to seal. It's still going to let air through, but it is quite a bit smaller. Now, another thing that means is in an unmodified pre-2K cocker body, you do have a smaller valve chamber. So let's look, we'll use this body that we're working on here. So obviously if we have our valve hanging out in here and our valve springs hanging out in here, we have our valve chamber here. This is where most of the volume behind the valve is going to be, as well as some volume down into the HPR and whatnot. But the size of the valve chamber, because it is drilled smaller in a pre-2K body, the size of the valve chamber is going to be smaller itself. Okay, so you're going to have slightly less volume between a pre-2K body and a post-2K body. Now this is a lot of why we see, if you're comparing stock setups between the two, as far as if we have completely stock lower tube in everything, a 2K cocker, just 2K WGP, will typically like to run around the 325, 350 PSI area, whereas a lot of post-2K cocker or pre-2K cockers will like to run in the 400 PSI area. They need a little bit more pressure because you have a little bit less volume, so you need to run a little bit higher pressure. Okay, so another thing that we want to cover is the VASA. So the VASA, obviously the vertical air source adapter. This is where your high pressure regulator, or HPR, comes up and screws into the, or mounts to the body itself. So this is a 2K VASA. And something, we'll see if we can get the profile. What I want you to see there is how the wings are kind of rounded, you see? As it comes down to the flat, the wings themselves are rounded. Okay, that's because most 2K bodies are actually rounded on the bottom in the front. Whereas with a standard pre-2K VASA, you can see the shoulder there for the wings is square. Okay? That's because most pre-2K bodies, the body was milled flat and square on the lower tube. So that's just another thing you need to look out for. Obviously you're going to have some trouble trying to fit a 2K VASA onto a pre-2K body. It's not going to want to sit correctly. Now another thing we wanted to cover is back blocks. Now, we've all seen how bolts come in different lengths. Okay, you have pre-2K, you have post-2K, you have half blocks, you have Evo and Evo or P block length. What that means is you have to correlate the correct length bolt to how deep the back block sets into the body. Okay, and I'll kind of explain that here. So this is a pre-2K back block. Okay, you can see we've got quite a bit of meat on both sides, and we've got the hole for our bolt pin. This is a post-2K or 2K spec back block. Quite a bit less meat on either side. So if we put them up side by side, you can see there's quite a bit more meat on that pre-2K back block. So what that means is that if I try, most 2K bolts will not mount up into a pre-2K back block correctly because there is more meat on the back, and a lot of them do have a bit of a knob in the back preventing them from going that much further into the back block. Okay, so what that means is that if I were to take, let's say, a pre-2K back block or a 2K back block and use a pre-2K bolt, I don't have as much meat up front spacing that bolt out away from the body, which means the tip of my bolt is going to protrude too far in to the breech, okay, which is going to cause you some problems down the road. And vice versa, if I were to use a pre-2K back block and try to use a 2K bolt in this, if it were to mount up, that would, given that there's more meat on this front edge, that would put the face of my bolt too far back in the breech, okay, which is going to cause you some issues later. Now, that being said, if you do have, say, a 2K spec body and you need a bolt to fit it and you just don't have the right one, as long as you are using the length of bolt that corresponds to the back block that you're using, you'll be fine. You can have a 2K spec body and a pre-2K bolt if you use a pre-2K back block, and vice versa. So, those are some of your big differences. Now, one other thing that I did want to cover is most of us who have messed with any sort of 2K spec cocker, obviously when you go to adjust the hammer lug, you go down from the top through the hole to get down into the lower tube and adjust your hammer lug. A lot of pre-2K cockers, especially early ones, early 90s ones, did not have that hole. That is not something that they had, I don't want to say it's not something they had figured out, it's something that they hadn't thought of that would make it easier. The design was different at that time. What you would have had instead, you would have had a different kind of hammer. Okay, so this is a true old style hammer, and as you can see, that hole does not go all the way through. You have the hammer lug on the bottom, and if we scooch up real close here, you can see that hammer lug actually has threads on it. Okay, this is the screw portion, so to speak, of a hammer lug. And this bottom is actually hex broached. It's beat to hell, but it's hex broached. Okay, what that means is that when you were doing timing adjustments, or specifically lug adjustments on some of the early autocockers, if you needed to make an adjustment to the lug, you actually had to take the frame off, get down underneath, adjust your lug, put the frame back on. Now, we don't have to do that with most stuff nowadays, as a lot of the bodies out there were either later drilled for that adjustment hole so that they could use newer hammers, or they were, or you just didn't have to worry about it because it was a 2K spec body and that was already drilled. So those are really some of your biggest differences between a pre-2K and post-2K autococker as far as parts go. Now, there were a lot of different parts available at different times. Now, if you're trying to do a restoration, there are obviously certain parts that have several generations, and you want to go with a period-specific part, which leads to the other end of the other side of the question that our viewer had asked. He asked, why does he see so many Palmer's stabilizer regulators on autocockers? Now, I mean, there's a couple reasons. One, Why do you see any parts on autocockers? Because people like them, because they work. And that can be said for Palmer's as well. The biggest thing, and why you see a lot of Palmer's stuff, both on some newer stuff and a lot of the older stuff, is that Palmer's has been a massive custom shop forever. Still to this day, their motto is obviously where custom still means something. Palmer really started out as a tinkerer, just like one of us. He started working with some of the old brass markers, looking at them and looking at the engineering of them, figuring out how to make the airflow better, how to make them more efficient, how to upgrade the feed tubes, how to solder on, longer barrels and whatnot. He started out as a tinkerer just like the rest of us. And with really one good magazine article, that kind of skyrocketed that career and turned it into a complete shop and a brand, and still to this day a huge name in the sport, especially with autocockers. So why do you see a lot of Palmer's products on some of these guns? One, they work. They're good stuff. It's still a great custom shop. They're still good people to work with. But a lot of it really comes down to people use the parts that they like. And so a lot of times, they may be trying to pay homage to the era in which that marker was produced, or they may just really like the parts. That's a lot of what it comes down to. So I think that's pretty much everything that we wanted to cover tonight. Obviously, if there is anything else that I've missed, I'm sure there's some differences I have. But if there's anything else that you guys want to talk about or anything I didn't cover fully, just let me know. Always happy to make another video for you guys. And on that note, sorry I haven't been making so many videos here recently. I have been absolutely swamped in tech work, which is awesome. I'm really enjoying it, really get to work on some really cool stuff, but I haven't had much time for anything except for working on really cool stuff. So I've got a lot of stuff hopefully headed out the door here in the next week or so. I've got probably another 3 or 4 behind them waiting to even get started being worked on. So hopefully I will be able to clear up some time to make some more videos. And as always, guys, let me know what you want to see next, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.